This is Get Inspired with Dr. Barb Show. Hello, everyone. That's your host, Dr. Barbara Voukaitis. And we are again interviewing a fantastic guest on Get Inspired with Dr. Barb. As usually, we have fabulous guests whose initiatives, activities can really do so much for improvement of our education, not just in the United States, but I think across the globe, because those issues with education and what students experience are really experienced across the entire globe, pretty much. Maybe with the exception of Finland, perhaps, even though they also have issues, I'm sure, as usually everywhere. And we are so grateful today for the wonderful presence of one and only, I have to say that, Jeff Karp, Dr. Jeff Karp. Welcome, Jeff, on Get Inspired with Dr. Barb.
Hey, so great to be here. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me on your show.
You are so welcome. Jeff, a little introduction of you to our audience. You are Harvard Medical School professor. You are also working in bioengineering field. Some of us might not know what that even is. So you are a bioengineer. You have your own award-winning incredible lab that does a lot of work in terms of inventing all kinds of materials, devices for the medical field. And these devices can even save lives, which is absolutely incredible. And you are a published author of an incredible book I had a chance to read, Lit, that can inspire just about anybody in terms of how you kind of like reinvent yourself, take the power, use whatever you already have inside of you, and also some external circumstances, because they always exist, and just make something big out of it, something that can serve you and really can help you use your passions or even maybe find them. Is there anything else you would like to add to that background?
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and I mean, I would just emphasize a little bit about just the connection to the natural world and how important that is, especially today with how technology is in many ways kind of driving us away from the natural world, and how reconnecting with it, with what's within us and what's around us in our environments, can really be like a wellspring of energy and clarity and simplicity, and can really help us to tap into our creativity and our curiosity and connection, and I think can address a lot of the challenges that we face today.
That's amazing. And I see you read in your book too, you talk about this a lot. But before we talk a little bit about your own struggles, because you were a professor, you are inventor, but not everybody might know that it didn't start so huge. You were just a kid with issues. So many kids these days have attention deficit, autism. They are neurodivergent in all different ways. But before we move to this area, because this is what we focus on, my podcast, trying to spot ideas, new initiatives that can help children, but also parents and also teachers, because we are all in this together. What does your lab do? What kind of inventions do you work on there, and what these inventions do? And maybe you can let us know about one that you consider the biggest one, although there's probably more than one.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for that question. I mean, I would first say that, just to kind of tie a few things that you said together, early in my life, I did struggle a lot with ADA and other learning differences, and it was really, really challenging. I'm happy to kind of tell some of those stories and things, but basically, in a nutshell, I was in order to survive, I had to develop tools to navigate life. And so through the support of my parents and, a couple teachers, this was at a time where I was getting labels like that I was lazy and that I was never going to amount to anything. And, just all these kind of negative labels that are really common, I think, especially for children with learning differences. And so I developed tools, and those tools were really survival tools.
Yeah.
And then the tools came out of the laboratory of my own life. And so I needed to experiment with these tools and, things to help me to focus, to be able to be persistent, because it took me always like 2 or 3 times longer to do things than everybody else. Tools that enabled me to tap into nature as well, so that I could kind of calm myself down and really bring myself back to center, and a bunch of other tools. And these tools, eventually I started to use them for not just survival, but for applying myself for things that I was really interested in. And I became very interested in medicine, and in particular in developing medical devices and trying to develop therapies that could help patients as quickly as possible. And so in my laboratory, it's kind of like an extension of that whole continuum, where we've been developing, for example, tissue glues, so surgical adhesives that we demonstrated could seal holes inside a beating heart. It's in 2 clinical trials right now, this glue,
Wow.
for hernia repair as well as nerve reconstruction. And it's just one example. And a lot of the technologies in the lab, the trajectory of kind of advancing the technology involves coming up with ideas and then hitting a wall and not knowing really whether we're going to be able to go past it, but then turning to nature for inspiration as a way to hijack our thinking, to bring in fresh ideas and fresh energy into projects, and this idea that evolution is the best problem solver. And so a lot of our technologies are bio-inspired. So that's one example, but we've developed needles that automatically stop in between
Yep.
the layers of the eye to deliver gene therapy to the back of the eye. We developed a nasal spray that we demonstrated in the lab could neutralize 99.99% of COVID-19 and H1N1 and RSV and the flu and pneumonia. And so, we're developing all kinds of different technologies, but it's really based on these tools that I had been developing early in my life to survive the education system.
This is so amazing. I mean, when I hear you, you said you heard things such as you lazy and you're never going to really achieve anything.
Yeah.
So you probably heard things that educational system is one system, but there's all different schools, different teachers, right? We all hear it. It's not the same for everyone. And I've noticed, well, those kids who have these issues, often that they have so-called IEP plans, right? But as you go higher in your academic career in the school system, like you go to high school, it's very hard because you then have more teachers. And many classroom teachers, general education teachers, they call them, they kind of think about themselves, many, not all. I just teach the kids. If anybody has issues, then there is a special education teacher. Let them take care of the kids who have those issues. That is not my job. But we know that in progressive education, in new era of what education should look like, it should not be like that. Everybody teaches all kids. And in your book, you talk about neurodivergent population is these kids with IEP and the rest is just some kind of normalcy. But I love what you're saying. Everybody is somewhere on the spectrum of being neurodivergent. And that's just absolutely incredible. I love this philosophy. It's just, how did you survive? What did you tell yourself when you heard these stories about yourself? You're not going to be anything good. You're not going to achieve anything. What did you feel in these moments? I have no idea. Take us to that moment.
Yeah, I think that you're really hitting on some important points that need to be emphasized, which is that I think the system is trying to compartmentalize the children. They're trying to put the children into specific buckets. And the system is sort of defined in a very structured way, and then people are using the system to define the children. So if the children are not working within the system, then it means there's something wrong with them, right? But I think that the problem here is that we're thinking about the wrong system. And because the education system is like a human constructed system that has a lot of limitations and a lot of, I think a lot of processes that were implemented for scalability. So education could be scaled. And so we're telling children that they have a disability when really what they have are different abilities. And I think that it sends a negative message to a huge percentage of children who go through school and are essentially told that they're stupid and they're meant to feel that way the entire time. And that leads to a lot of trauma. It creates these imprints that cause triggered responses throughout their life. And, I think it just sort of like, it just creates a pathway for those children that makes it hard to navigate their entire lifetime. And I think that, I think there's a lot that's happening right now in the education system, around like AI and more sort of personalized approaches, which I think, if done the right way, could really be transformative, because I really strongly believe that, all children have, everybody has unique gifts to bring to the world that can help to make the world a better place and to drive connection between people and to create and to inspire and to just share energy, right? And it's almost like one of these things, like if we were to look at nature, could we look at nature and say that certain plants or certain creatures or, have disabilities? Like, we just wouldn't do that, right? Like everything works within these ecosystems and these systems upon systems, and everything is contributing to everything else. And so I just think that, we just feel really sad, and for children who don't fit the typical mold of the education system and are essentially made to feel like there is a problem, and that the problem is them.
When, in fact, the more I listen to you speaking about it, the education system is in fact disabled.
Yeah, exactly. That's
That's a fact,
you
right?
nailed it. Yeah.
But Jeff, you heard these comments, and of course, it didn't make you feel good when you hear you lazy,
Yeah.
you this, you that. Just the other day, when I was talking to my child, she's 18, and she just experienced something personal. It was just really kind of very sad. And I'm saying to her, so tell me, what lessons did you learn from this experience? Because I was trying, right? Every lesson, every setback, obstacles is an experience. It's a learning opportunity. That's how I see that. She looks at me and she says that I'm dumb and stupid. And I was really shocked. And I'm like, who told you that? Where does this come from? Mom, from the early education, from first grade or whatever, something like that. Like, oh my gosh, Kalina, that's not what failures, mistakes, whatever you call them, are about. And I'm trying to now like rewire this idea what mistakes and these obstacles should be about. It was unbelievable. So it also, what you heard influenced you, but how did you turn this around? Because now you're saying you were from the beginning interested in nature and all that, and that's where it led you where you're now. So I would imagine every kid has something. Maybe they're not interested in nature. Maybe they're interested in something else.
Yeah.
So how did you turn this narrative around, and then how we can apply it, right, as far as advising somebody out there, I don't know, in middle school, high school, they don't think they can do much because they hear these narratives, but they can do more than they know and think right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think, what I needed back then because I was a C&D student. My second grade teacher wanted to hold me back to repeat the second grade. And, when I think about that, I'm like, whoa, like that's like, the second grade I don't think is really that difficult, for most kids, right? And the fact that I had to, I mean, so there was some really, I was really not, the system just really wasn't working for me, I mean, just like it was really, there was some sort of significant, just differences in how I saw the world, how I processed information, how and I felt like an alien. I mean, I felt like I didn't belong. I mean, I didn't understand anything. I didn't understand why other people were understanding things. Like it was really, and so I think, just want to emphasize that point that like in the second grade, it was really apparent that the system just wasn't working for me. And I think that one thing that I needed was because I felt that way, and it was, it was very emotionally taxing. I get home every day, and I just would feel exhausted because I was trying to figure out how to fit in, socially, how to learn, and to the outsiders, it looked like I wasn't trying, but inside, I was trying like 10 times harder than everybody else. And that's something that I think is sort of like, the perception is often completely opposite for children who have learning differences, is that they are trying. They're trying harder than you could possibly imagine. And the one thing that I really needed at that time was something in my life that could boost my confidence. And that actually came from who in the third or fourth grade, I forget, we started to do these speech competitions. And so, and they were like 2 or 3 minutes long or something. And, it was kind of the thing, like I remember my mom would actually sit down and help me with assignments, like, for like through all the grades, really, help me interpret what the teacher was asking, because that was a big problem. I could never understand what was being asked. Every question I found was vague. So what my mom did is she actually wrote the speeches for me, and then she helped me memorize, and I was not very good at memorizing. In fact, I just thought I was horrible at it. And she said, well, if you start with one word, okay, here's the first word, and then of course, I got that pretty quickly. And then she said, well, if you can do one word, you can do two. And then if you can do two, you can do three. And if you can do three, you can do a sentence. And she just sort of held my hand and walked me through it. And, within a couple weeks, I had the whole thing memorized. And then she coached me in how to say it. And I remember it was actually quite frustrating. It was not a simple, easy, pleasant experience per se, because I was really pushing up against my own capabilities and sort of pushing beyond. And then feeling the emotion associated with that, but then getting back up, and with her encouragement, I started to perform well. And then I became the kid to beat. Like I actually started taking home trophies from beach competitions. And, I ended up winning like the top award in my school, and I went on to the next one, and then I presented once I actually made it all the way, and they felt like I was on like local television in my hometown, like saying my speech, and I presented in these other competitions and stuff. And so, but the key point here, I think, is that, when I sort of reflect back on that, I think every child needs one thing that they can cultivate confidence in, and it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't have to be school related. It could be anything. It could be a sport or a hobby or just an interest. It could be anything. And I think that when a child engages in such an activity and then they put effort in and they start to see returns on that effort, they start to see, they experience the positive neurotransmitters, in their brains kind of lighting them up, and that they connect that through their efforts, through their sort of persistence, through their actions, that they're able to make progress and that it is resonating with the people around them. I think that really creates a positive framework to apply to everything in life. And that was critical for me.
I love that. What you are actually referring to in education, we call it self-efficacy. So believe that you can succeed in something. It can be anything, like you said. It doesn't have to be memorizing speeches. Not every kid will get fired up about it, right? But It could be drawings. My kid is interested in drawing, has been perfecting drawing skills. And when you see you getting better at this and you get response from others, wow, I love this. You starting to like believe in yourself a little bit more. And I think this is a huge, huge piece of advice to all the children. It can be smaller ones, it can be at high school level. Find something you would like to try. If you don't know what it is, just try different things, I guess. And also, how do you think teachers can help kids with this? And also parents, what would your advice be for the teacher, for the parent? Because I think that they do have an important role to play. Somehow, sometimes you need to direct the kid a little bit. They just don't know what to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, one thing that I think we can do as parents and I think also, teachers is to observe the children and to try to provide different experiences or different opportunities for that child to engage. I think, there's ways that we can, as a community, kind of come together and even create lists of possibilities, like we could get together and sort of just like have a session where we say, okay, can everybody go around the room and let's say like, what are your children's interests, right? Like, what are they gravitating towards in and out of school? Like, what do they really like? And I think when you start to sort of populate that kind of a list, it creates, possibilities that you didn't see before, right? And there might be even opportunities where we can, through identifying the different interests, because likely there'll be a whole spectrum, right, of interests. Like some children maybe are playing chess and some are, playing in streams, like, or lakes, or, I don't know, like, or are doing sort of different hobbies. Like maybe some are into like fashion and some are into certain sports, and you just sort of get this whole sort of spectrum of possibilities. And then what that also does is it creates an opportunity to potentially even partner some of the children together, or to create the sort of constellation of energies for the children to now be able to go, like, you can go through the list with the children and say, here's a whole bunch of things. Is there anything here that you would like to try? Anything that's of interest? Anything that, you know what I mean? Like, I just feel like, and what I'm suggesting is one of like infinite possibilities, but just this idea of considering what are other possibilities that the child hasn't engaged yet, and that might be present in their backyard or in their neighborhood or in their community. And then as parents, we can start to find ways to connect the dots and bring our children into these different sort of activities and see how they respond and observe their interactions and if they like it or not. Because I think we tend to, as humans, think very linearly, and we tend to consider only the possibility that we're sort of experiencing in that moment. But yet there's like these just a wide spectrum of possibilities in every situation around us. So I think that could be really helpful.
And how did you notice that you gravitate towards like nature, learning about nature? What happened? When did they happen? When you were like in second grade, or even earlier or later? When did you find out about it? When did it start sort of like
Yeah.
boiling?
Yeah. What happened was in the third grade, we moved out to the country, and it was really, I had a sheep farm. There was a sheep farm beside us, a buffalo farm across the road. There was my driveway was like 1,000 feet long, carved through a forest. There was a creek, and we had, snapping turtles and crayfish and leeches and foxes. And I'd wake up in the middle of the night, there'd be a pack of wolves on my front lawn.
Wow.
So every time I got home, like, which I had to take because I was outside city limits, I took a bus and I got off the bus, and often I would feel exhausted and feel depleted and just demoralized from what had happened that day at school. But as I walked along the driveway, and there were no phones or anything, cell phones, I would just stare at the trees. And as I walked along the driveway, which took several minutes, like it was like a 10-minute walk or whatever it was, 8 minutes, 7, 8 minutes, whatever, I would just look, and I just felt this embrace of nature. Like it just had this calming, effect on me. And it was really profound, and I really sort of tapped into it and acknowledged it, and I recognized that something was happening, some shift was happening. And so I really looked forward to that every day.
I love that. Now, in the age of devices, that kid sitting in high school being told, you're not putting too much effort, and this idea of bad grade is a failure and all that. There's not that much encouragement and empowerment, unfortunately. The kid will use the cell phone at home to go on social media. I mean, which is a good thing too. I mean, you can meet a lot of people. There is such an incredible
Yeah.
opportunity right now. You don't have to be only reduced to the circle of friends you have in school and that you might not even like that much. So there is an opportunity here, but then there is also danger of spending too much time on social media. What you think young kids, teenagers should be aware of as far as using these devices in order to empower themselves and move away from what they hear in school and that is
Yeah.
not very encouraging?
Something that just jumps in my mind, just I think is something to consider is that, if we think of, for example, how companies operate, right? Like take some of the biggest companies on the planet, whether it's like Apple or Microsoft or, whatever the company is. And if we think of the companies and we think of like, okay, there's an executive, you have a CEO often, right? The person who's leading the company. And then you have like, there's some sort of like hierarchical kind of structure. And the people leading are, often incredibly smart, incredibly gifted, incredibly, they've been sort of cultivating their gifts and they're working extremely hard and they're bringing it. But at the same time, right, you have a board of directors that CEO is reporting to. So you never let the CEO go for too long. In fact, you meet with them quarterly, right? 4 times a year, and they have to report to a board of directors and all kind of advisors. And so, I don't know, I kind of think of it like, and that's really important, right? To get that advice and that feedback and continually evolve and grow and iterate and, right? And so I think if we think of individuals now in this world, I think the challenge is that we often operate without the kind of equivalent of a board of directors in our life, right? And so it's like we have all of this technology that's coming at us, all of this information, all of these sort of, there's $1 trillion that's spent on marketing and advertising every year to hijack our attention. And so here we are navigating through life, and we don't have the structure that you have in companies, right, to kind of navigate. And so my sense is that as a community, we need to start thinking about how can we create that structure for all of us so that we can, stay on track to achieve the things we really want to achieve, to really live intentional lives, to tap into the cues that we're getting and the guidance that we're getting from, our bodies are very intelligent, our minds, our interaction from others, but we often miss these cues because we're in this kind of cloud of information. So to me, that's something that we need to consider kind of moving forward, is that the challenge is that what we're doing is we're saying to the individual, like the child, oh, you need to regulate it, or the adult, right? Like we all need to personally regulate it. But that's not how it works with companies. And I know that's not necessarily the best example, but I do think there's important parallels there, because it's like, how do we, so I feel like we really need to find ways to help each other to navigate life and to have practices and rituals that we're constantly engaging in and tools that we're engaging so that we're really connecting with our core wisdom and advancing in ways that are really enriching our lives and deepening our experiences. And that's also where the book Lit that I wrote, kind of comes in, as multiple on-ramps for sort of intercepting patterns and leading more intentional life. And so I really feel like we all need to have strategies and tools to navigate. And when those strategies fall away, we often there's a gap between what we truly desire in the most of intentional ways and where we're at.
I totally get it. And I'm thinking of like an example. So for instance, my daughter loves music. So there is a lot of spending time on the device to listen to the music, learning about musicians. It's not just learning about music and their albums, their songs, and she knows she knows for every song when it was released. So the title of the song always comes with the year of release, which there's no way we will remember it, but she does. And I'm thinking about it. So using this interest, you can kind of direct it now. By the way, there is now a movie about this musician. How about if we maybe grab some friends or one of them from your circle? How about if we take a trip to the movie theater and watch that movie, just in case they don't figure it out before us? I'm just thinking about like how do we use their interest that they already have, and a lot of it comes from what they consume on social media. Let's do something different. Let's have a different experience that connects to these interests,
Yeah.
because they need to have some kind of incentive, right? Why should I get into something else? I like the stuff I have on my phone. I'm perfectly fine with that.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, no,
So
I think there are some really interesting opportunities that are available, but I think also maybe even more exciting is there's just having conversations about this can unleash and unveil all kinds of possibilities, because we all are endowed with different forms of creativity, and the ability to ask questions. I think are our greatest technology, and often, again, going back to school, often we've all been shamed for asking like a stupid or a dumb question, and then that
yeah.
sort of stifles our question asking ability and our evolution of that. But like, I feel like once we start tapping into that more, we start questioning, okay, what could be possibilities of how we could help our children to connect with their interests, to help them cultivate their gifts, to help them tap into their superpowers. And I think there's all kinds of different ways. And, one of the things I've been thinking a lot about recently is even just this apprenticeship model, right? Like, I think
Yes.
if you kind of go back, a couple hundred years ago, like that's kind of how society generally operated, was that people learn trades and things via apprenticeships. And the apprenticeships are quite exciting and I think exhilarating, and, and enriching for people, because you have a mentor who's right there, and you're seeing with your own eyes, your hands are, you're touching things, and and so to me, like, even for example, my daughter is really interested. She's 16 and she's really interested in. She says one day she wants to have her own hair salon, right? And so we were able to find like a little summer program that isn't around like fashion and like
Yeah.
so we're trying to help her like cultivate that.
Yeah.
And that's sort of one of the things I think that we can do. And I think as we think about it more, then people can start unleashing their creativity into creating opportunities that could further this for other children, right? Like here we are, like, there's a lot of
Yes.
people who are thinking about starting businesses, or they're coming up with ideas of things that they want to do in their career next. And when we identify these kind of challenges and it really resonates, and we focus our attention on it, then we start channeling our creative energy and our persistence and our passion into creating these opportunities. And so I think, this could be huge for new avenues for children to engage in the community and to, I just think there's so many
I
possibilities.
love it. And opportunities for people to get and start into these initiatives, help kids and help the society and help themselves, because they can start literally some businesses that can promote these ideas. I know we can talk forever. I would love to keep you much longer here, like 2 more hours, but it's not going to happen. And before we tell our audience where they can follow you and where they can find your book, grab your book, which is absolutely amazing book. So I recommend it to everyone. I know that you are thinking of some initiative, something to help neurodivergent community or children. Is this something that is just the beginning of your thinking, or maybe you have already a more concrete sort of plan, or you're already working towards it? If you could, if it's possible to say a little bit more about it, we would appreciate that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, no, I've been working on actually like a workbook to help children to tap into their superpowers.
Awesome.
Mainly focused on neurodivergent children and adolescents, but really could be anybody, because as you sort of started off this conversation, we're all on a spectrum. We're all on multiple spectrums, actually.
Yeah, not just one. You're right.
And I think it's good to kind of think about it that way, and that we just all have these incredible gifts. We can make it really exciting and a journey in life to discover those gifts and help each other to cultivate those gifts and turn them into superpowers. And that's when I think that's when we really start to thrive, is when we start to evolve in that process. And so I've been working on that, and I'm trying to figure out the best format of how to
Yeah.
unleash this into the world. But yeah, that's one of the things that I think a lot about.
That's exciting. And I would love to, as soon as it's out,
Yeah.
I'd love to promote among my circles of educators and not only, and parents. I think that there is so much more than parents can do in terms of not just guiding children, but also advocating in schools. I think they have more power than they currently utilize. So thank you so much for telling us a little bit more about those details of this new project. Where do audience can follow you on social medias, and also where they can purchase your book? We would like to hear that.
Yeah, so the easiest way to connect is on my website, which is just my name. So Jeff Karp, Karp with a K, Karp.com. And there you can find all kinds of information about the book Lit, about my laboratory, and then connections to the various social media platforms that I am present on, including LinkedIn and Instagram and others. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jeff. It was absolutely a very inspiring conversation with you that could really spark some changes when a teacher or a parent or a child/teenager thinks about all these ideas. Everybody can take something out of it, including school administrators, because they are in that picture too, obviously. We all have a role to play. And I really, really am so grateful for your appearance here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, no, this is wonderful. I really enjoyed this conversation.
You're very welcome, because it's all about education, but not only, of course. And please, everyone, follow the show, Get Inspired with Dr. Barb. Follow Jeff Karp and his initiatives and activities. He's just absolutely amazing person. And let us know what you think about this episode, and spread awareness. Share it with teachers, parents, school administrators, and teenagers too, and not only, because everybody can find something very useful in this episode. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
This is Get Inspired